there's a whole story of evolution that starts 13.8 billion years ago. And I'm just the latest iteration of that. And I am trying as best I can, at least I'm consciously trying, to unfurl my sails to the animating energetics of evolution that are already here, that have me here in the first place.
This is 10,000 Heroes, and I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. 10,000 Heroes is about purpose, vision, and inspiration. I see us all as arrows of love contributing to the evolution of human happiness and consciousness, each in our own unique and perfect way. So my conversation today was with Jeff Salzman, who's best known for his podcast, The Daily Evolver. We've run into the integral worldview a couple of times on the show, and Jeff is one of its best known proponents. I left the conversation with a deep sense of relaxation because that's what Jeff exudes. If you're looking for an antidote to all the fear-mongering and restlessness and stress that is so accessible, but without ignoring the giant issues at stake, this episode is for you. Before we start, a little reminder. Our movement, Momentum Lab, is having its second ever in-person gathering. We're getting together from December 15th to 18th at Joshua Tree, California for a transformative retreat. If you want to get the next level of clarity into your personal purpose and vision with me and the rest of the Momentum Lab core team, I highly suggest you check it out. It's called the Night Vision Summit, and the details are at momentumlab.com/NVS. NVS like Night Vision Summit. Or be modern and click on the link in the show notes. So, welcome back to the show. Welcome, Jeff Salzman. Let's jump in. The only way for us to really get to where we're going in terms of consciousness and evolution is if everybody's involved. And, I want to help everybody be involved. And that means like understanding your purpose, like what are you here to contribute and how are you here to make sense of all the different textures of your life? So that's what I do. And the podcast is like talking to people who have done that to a greater or lesser degree as a vehicle for inspiration.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic.
So maybe we just start, and this is my first question, is what do you feel that is for you?
Yeah. Well, it's, first of all, I'm just sitting here receiving what you did and who you are and recognize that as an evolutionary life, a life lived by somebody who has a sense that my being here matters. It's not an accident that I'm here, that I have something to do, that I am contributing in some way, that I can, at some point in our own cultural evolution, we see, because of science, that, there's a whole story of evolution that starts 13.8 billion years ago. And I'm just the latest iteration of that. And I am trying as best I can, at least I'm consciously trying, to unfurl my sails to the animating energetics of evolution that are already here, that have me here in the first place. So, that's when we talk about evolution, of course, that's integral theory, and that's what I do. And I know talking about sex ecology and spirituality, that's the whole, the core of the idea is that not only do we have the evolution of form in terms of matter, we have and even life, but we have the evolution of consciousness. And there are stages of consciousness development that we can map out in human history. And we can actually see them also in our own personal history. We're magic, then we're mythic, then we get all kind of, rational, and then maybe we get sensitive and postmodern. And then there's that integral stage, which is the emergent stage in the culture in general, all over the world. And that's the stage of development that does a couple things. One, first of all, it sees evolution itself. It sees that there is something going on here that is moving things forward in some sort of increased complexity. Now, we're not always moving forward in terms of things being uniformly better. I mean, is it better to be a magical child or a depressed 14-year-old? Well, welcome to evolution. It's not always pretty, but there is an added complexity to it. And so we see that in our culture. And so we see that. And then on a personal level, it's like, so, okay, who is the next Jeff in my case that wants to be coming online? And how can I notice that? How can I participate in that? How can I see that I don't need to create him entirely, that there is a force of loving intelligence that's also participating in this? And so we all do that, only more consciously. And we do that as a culture too, where there is, this is another one of the big markers of integral consciousness, is that we want to integrate the best of all of the previous stages of human development. And so we do want to re-enchant the world with magic. We do want to tell great stories that like great myths. E.O. Wilson said that evolution is the greatest myth of all time. And he meant that in a good way because, something's going on here. It's a big story. And we want to be rational and we want to recognize the world in its own terms and work with the forces of nature in a way that where we can create and achieve and do what we did in modernity, which is triple lifespans and educate people and develop the modern world. And that doesn't end there. There's a movement, and we see this coming out of modernity, flourishing mostly in the 60s, of a countercultural move of world centrism beyond ethnocentrism or patriotism, where there's an understanding of the karmas of history and the people who have been left out of history and the people, how we tell stories and sensitivity and interiority, actually, psychology, psychotherapy. This all really comes online. Psychedelics is a big part of why, actually. And so that comes online. And we can see that. And we can see that if we look at history, one of the ways that this development happens is that these worldviews just naturally, and I don't approve of this actually in terms of designing the universe, but apparently.
Were you not consulted?
I was not consulted, or I would have warned against this. But indeed, it does seem to be the physics of this universe that we fight our way forward. Now, we also friend our way forward, fortunately. But, we're supposed to fight here. It's not supposed to be easy. At these later stages of development, we want to fight in ways that, without real bullets and blood and guts. I mean, we just want to, kill each other on Twitter. But that impulse to be in the arena with each other is really just sort of built in. And yet, as we move into this integral stage of development, and I can see this, and maybe you can too, I think you can, looking at your podcasts, that there's a stage of people who are tired of right fighting for their ideology. And they're just bored with it. That's boredom is one of the great engines of evolution. I always said, human beings, you can do anything to us, but don't bore us. And so there's a new emergent view that wants to, what do my political opponents really think? What piece of the truth what are they seeing that I'm not? How are they processing things in a way that I'm not? They can't just be evil. It can't just be this simple. It can't just be MSNBC, and that's this new stage of integration. It's called the integral stage. And we want, re-enchant the world. We want to tell the great stories. We want to be rational. We want to be sensitive and, make the better world. And now, because we know that we're working with the forces of evolution, we can relax a little bit, know that we're being lived. It's not just all up to us. We haven't driven it into the ditch. It's not our fault. And so that's sort of the basic frame of evolution or of integral consciousness that I think more and more people are entering.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question a little bit because I think you may have dodged the question, which of course, the part of what you're doing right now is this process of inquiry of who is the next Jeff, and that's part of hopefully what I'm doing right now of who is the next Ankur and what every single one of our listeners is doing. But for you, like what besides coming to terms with your own evolution, is there another purpose that you've identified that is a theme?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm actually, you can be my executive coach. Uh,
Lovely. Let's do it.
yeah, I took the summer off from my podcast, which I've been doing for 12 years. And I have been working in my garden. I hope nobody's offended by this, but I've seen myself as this is the summer of being a Hausfrau, which is German for housewife, which sort of conjures up this plump, kind of with an apron. And that's me. So I'm working in the garden. I'm taking care of the family. I'm gossiping. I'm cooking. I'm organizing, and I'm loving it, I got to say. And I'm not missing work. Now, so that is so, so my question to myself is this a degeneration or is this a generation? Because I always think there's something that always haunts me from Scott Peck. I don't know if you wrote The Road Less Traveled. It was a big book in the 80s or 90s, whatever. And he talked about that the opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is laziness. And so it has that sense of that in order to be growing, you need to be swimming upstream somehow. You need to be working at it. It can't just be as easy as doing just what you want to do. And at this point, for me personally, since you're asking me personally, I'm 68 years old. I don't need to work anymore. I can be a Hausfrau if I want to be. So that's one impulse that I'm dealing with. The other one is I do have something to say. And my thing with the Daily Evolver has been to look at current events, basically through the lens of integral theory. So I use current events to teach integral theory, and I use integral theory to help understand current events. And I'm good at that. That comes easily to me. It's like falling off a log. So I want to not let that go, but I'm not sure I want to go to the trouble of a podcast and all of the editing, posting, all that stuff. So what has been natural? So I, and I would recommend this to people when you're sort of, what's the next me that's coming online? Where's the juice? What am I naturally magnetizing to? And for me, it's Twitter, I have to say. If I have some time free from my busy schedule of walking the dogs, then I will sit and, do Twitter. And I've been a Twitter lurker for years, just reading it, but I've posted here and there. I've posted all my podcasts are all on there too. But there's something about the immediacy of that. There's something about the arena of intellectual, combat and comradeship, both, that appeals to me. So I may be going in that direction, and I thought I'd know by September, and I'm not sure I do.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing you said that really struck me. You said, I don't need to work anymore. And work is, it's so multidimensional in our society. And what I heard with that is you don't need like financial reward from your daily action. But I'll ask it to you as a question. Is there a need in you to continue contributing?
You mean in terms of the intellectual space?
The work you've been doing, like current events, integral theory, it's only like more important every moment. Like you're saying, this process of evolution it's not just that it's not pretty, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine, the incredible like ups and downs in terms of just people's basic rights over their bodies in different countries. Like people need someone with a long-term perspective to make sense of it, even just for our mental health. Like, and it's clear it's effortless for you to do that, but does it still meet a need of contributing? Or are you just like, fuck these people. I gave them what I gave.
What do you people want from me?
Yeah, I'm going to grow some dope eggplants and you can all just burn.
Well, there might be some middle ground in there. I'm actually not sure if I can do it in a way that feels more juicy and less onerous, if you will. And I think Twitter could be it. And the other thing, Ankur, is that, there's a certain silo to the integral world that, I have had the same, I have several thousand people who will listen to anything I put out pretty much. And that's been the case for, 12 years, basically, almost. I mean, it built, but, 4,000, 5,000 people. It's not that much in the scheme of things, but it's not nothing in terms of, who it's influencing and, the impact it's making. So I appreciate that. What Twitter also offers me is the opportunity to get out of the silo. There's a way in which Twitter just gets you into the intelligentsia to the degree that you're offering something that is appealing. And that's the challenge for me. That's always been my challenge. How do I translate this, what I think is just, to lit me up, this idea of cultural evolution, consciousness evolution, of integrating worldviews. I think it's absolutely more needed every day. And I do have this gift, to be able to give here. And I want to notch it, after 12 years, there's a certain, I've done that. And so I do feel that moving into the Twitterverse, which is what I've been doing, offers more opportunity to get it out there and make a bigger impact outside of the silo too. That's important.
Yeah. So I get it. You're not feeling famous enough.
If I could do it under a pseudonym and drop it into a well, I would. I don't want any fame. I don't like.
But the point is good though. Like, I mean, if you were on, that's the thing. I was going to use a TV channel example, which I don't even know what the TV channels are these days. But even then, they're already like pre-ideologically divided. Like, so if you had a show on CNN or whatever, it would still only reach people in a certain. It's more mainstream than your Daily Evolver following, but it's not satisfying. So yeah, I could see, especially the whole nature of the Integral project would call you to a much broader spectrum or diversity of an audience.
Yeah, it does. Yes, absolutely. No, I want to see this be in the intellectual space in the mainstream. And it's not. It's really not. It is in some ways de facto. There are people who, as I said, you can see them on Twitter and sometimes even on mainstream TV, that are trying to integrate worldviews with other people that were previously their enemies. So that is happening. And that's, I think, part of just the movement of culture. In terms of the integral model and the integral philosophy and the actual tenets of integral theory, they're very helpful. They're very, very helpful in getting that nascent worldview traction, and helping it to cohere into something that is magnetizes people and offers, a way to become, I love what Ken Wilber said, is that when you realize that you're an integral consciousness, you're suddenly 12 times smarter than you thought you were, because you're actually able to see the world through many more lenses.
Yeah, we're not spending all that time rejecting.
Yes, exactly. And defending and protecting and inveighing. It's exhausting,
Yeah. So are there people that you look to who are doing that in the modern, like, politicians, that you're like, oh, these people are at this other level?
Yeah, there's Obama is always sort of my gold standard for somebody who just has the fragrance of integral consciousness in the sense, not necessarily in terms of his policies, but in terms of, if you read his books, if you read his speeches even. He just did a show for National Geographic on national parks of the world. The sensibility of these shows is so much more integral, if you will. There's a sparkle to it. And he's narrating, he's there, and in the wild and all of this stuff. Just won an Emmy for it. That guy has the just the ability to flow through perspectives and still be very effective in the world, for God's sakes. He's a two-term president of the United States. So there's that. I think Pete Buttigieg has some of those qualities of just natural harmonizing of perspectives. There are certainly people I follow on Twitter that I find extra interesting, trying to, think of who to name. But, Andrew Sullivan to some degree, but they all fall short. They don't all fall short. But the problem with integral is, for mainstream, is that it does have a spiritual component. There is some sense that there is an intention to the universe. that there is you wouldn't want to use this word, but there is a progress through. You have to sort of can't be a naive progress, but looking at the growth of an individual human being is a very good model for that. Is it always pretty? Is it always easy? Is it always, but the growth is built in. And there's something about that current culture can't accept. And green, particularly, which is a postmodern, the whole purpose of postmodern thought is to deconstruct the triumphalist progress narratives of the previous stages. So I get it, that's their job and that's what they're doing, but there wants to be a natural hierarchy or a natural movement that can be discerned. And that's a problem for mainstream. But that's okay, because progress, if you will, has always happened by people, countering the mainstream and bringing something new to the party.
Okay.
So that's,
Yeah.
that's my job.
Yeah. And so, yeah, with your life, when and how did you tune in to that intention that's happening in evolution? Imagining that you came from the scientific orange perspective and then like the postmodern rejection perspective. How did you become awakened to that kind of mystical truth that we normally associate with like Christian fundamentalists in my hometown?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I came from Christian fundamentalism, was the original thing. In fact, I was just back in my home country visiting the family, and they're very traditional. It's Western Pennsylvania, coal mining, truck driving, Trumpers, God and country people. So I did come from that. Now, I rejected that early in my life and became kind of scientific, and then moved to Boulder, Colorado here, and, became kind of very postmodern and all that good stuff. And so I was trying to figure all that out. And I think, maybe 27, 28 years old, this is 30 plus years ago. And I walked into a bookstore and saw laying on the table a book called I think it's a transpersonal story of human evolution or something by Ken Wilber. But Up from Eden, those three words reorganized my thinking in the moment. I can literally remember. And it was like, oh, humanity has come up from Eden. We haven't fallen from Eden. There's an upward movement. And I got the book, and I had been looking for a teacher. I was, bouncing around all these and seminars. I've always been a seeker, if you will. I'm in Boulder. There's the big Buddhist community. I was going to all these teachers traveling through. My friends were all finding teachers. I didn't find anybody. But I knew by page 18 that I had found my teacher in Ken Wilber, who was the author of this book, and talking about this story of evolution that had just lit me up and, so reorganized my thoughts. So that was however many years ago that was. I think the book was published in 1980, and it was still pretty new. So I went through my decades of being a lonely Ken Wilber devotee, if you will. I had no idea he lived 5 miles from me. It was just a coincidence. I didn't know. I didn't even know he lived here. And I'm not a guy who tries to meet his authors. I just don't want to bother them. So I never cared, really. I didn't expect it until I had a lunch with a friend of mine, and of course I was trying to force feed integral theory into her, as I was everyone. I was to no avail, absolutely none. But she actually said, "Oh, Ken Wilber, I know Ken Wilber. He lives up in Red Hill Lane." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, my husband does his teeth." And so her husband's a dentist. And even then, so I knew that Ken lived here, but I didn't try to contact him. And probably some of the reason was he was famously reclusive at that point. To write SES, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality, he dropped out of pretty much all contact for several years and wrote that book. But it turns out he was back and he was out. And Ken is personally just, after reading these books, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect this sparkly, fun, verbal, completely charming person that he is. And And at that point, he was just in his prime. And so I did, through my friend, she told him about me and he emailed me. And I had just sold a business and whatever in Boulder. And so he got with me. He invited me to lunch. I went up to Red Hill Lane. And that was 2003. So this is right when you're getting into it. And he and I and several people he had already started the Integral Institute at that point and was doing stuff. But I came on, and my business had been producing seminars. So I'd been producing these seminars on time management, stress management, all these kind of things to businesses. So I knew that business. And we started doing these integral seminars in 2003, 2004, 5, 6, 7. And they were very fruitful. We did integral psychotherapy, integral business, integral life practice, integral Christianity, integral all kinds of Buddhism, of course. And those became sort of a keystone of the integral movement that has come out of that. And we did the Integral Institute. The Integral Institute fell apart in 2007, I think, for, sort of typical kind of reasons. And so the integral movement, if you will, has been pretty much decentralized since then. And, like a dandelion, it's just seeded itself all over the place. And there is a self-identified integral movement. There's conferences and stuff and lots of stuff online. And so, here we are.
Okay, so it wasn't even reading the book, it was seeing the title of the book.
If seeing the title of the book, I've often said that was 50% of my integral realization, was seeing the title of that book, because I was trying to figure out what's going on here, as seekers do.
Yeah. But when you left your hometown, you left the kind of Christian fundamentalism. Did you throw out the whole notion of kind of the divine?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, I was a fanatically religious atheist.
Yeah. I went through that phase too. It's a good phase.
It is. No, I mean, every stage wants to come in on a fanaticism, actually. It's funny. And they do. So you get, of course, let me count the ways there are fanatical traditionalists. That's the whole thing. Witch burning. But there are fanatical modernists where just everything is reduced to material. There's nothing besides matter. Everything has to be reduced to rational. And of course, there are religious postmodernists, where the religion of woke is unquestioned dogma. And all of them, if we get by the fanatics, we realize that every one of them is bringing in a new great capital T truth into the universe, into the cosmos. And so our job as integralists, we don't mind the fanatics. I mean, we do. I mean, we want to keep the fanatics from, hurting each other. But we want to recognize their gifts and the piece of the truth that they're bringing, or actually I don't even like piece of the truth. It's like the truth that each of them are bringing to this bigger integration.
Yeah. So, okay. As an integral guy that kind of has had your mind and your heart reopened to the notion of like divinity and intention after this long roundabout journey, what is your take on regret and mistakes? Like, do you think that everything happened as for a reason? Or do you think that you could have had access to your actual purpose in your career 20 years earlier or 15 years earlier, if only you had done something differently? Or is that now how you think about it?
Well, I don't exactly know. There's the procreant urge of creativity is just by nature unknowable. So every moment has a sort of a creative possibility in it. And two roads can diverge in the yellow wood, the poem by Robert Frost. And it just makes all the difference, then that road leads to that road leads to that road. When I look at my life, Ankur, I have to say, I can't believe how each road led into the next in a way that was astonishing to me. And I made many mistakes along the way, but the roads that diverged and opened themselves to me, I did walk through I did walk through them. And there were times at every sort of fork in the road when I wasn't sure. I'm in a fork of the road right now, and I'm not sure, but I chose the one less traveled by, as Robert Frost would say. And that has made all the difference. So, I don't, what I have regret about when I hurt people's feelings, I can still go back and replay, many dozens of incidents where, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I do that? Why did I hurt somebody's feelings? But in terms of life decisions, not really, not a lot. I mean, I don't, and this is in a way part of my, I suppose, worldview. And that is that life is so rich and just so, another poet, the tapestry of circumstance is intricate and dense. That's Wallace and Borska. And I love that. It's like life is so intricate and dense that there's lots of dots you can connect and have a great life. There's lots of roads you can take, every one of them fruitful, every one of them, open opening to new territory, because that's the nature of life. It's always opening into new territory. So in a way, that's a little bit of a relief because you don't have to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think no matter, I try to maintain that no matter what happens, as long as I have that kind of curiosity and excitement to engage with the present moment, there's just so much to be milked out of it.
Yes. Yes. And every person you meet is on their journey. They're sacred, divine, they're also no two alike, Ankur, in all of time and space. There's no two alike. So then every person you meet is like, oh my goodness gracious, who are you? What's going on here? What's happening now? And that's a re-enchantment of life.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it brings to mind the old stories in many traditions that the stranger, the beggar, anyone you meet could potentially be the divine in disguise, asking for a little
Yeah,
food at your doorstep.
absolutely. The least of us. Yes. No, it's wonderful. And that's where, the bringing back of these earlier worldviews of myth and enchantment and magic and meaning and, obedience to the greater, consciousness, if you will, is that's what's needed. We talk about the meaning crisis. Well, there's no meaning crisis when you have that there because, it's obvious. It's everywhere. The world is drenched in meaning. So, but modernity killed God. And modernity, wrung enchantment out of the system. It had to. It's part of human evolution. Apparently, that's how it works. You have to completely deconstruct the previous stage, and it did. And so here we are, hurtling through space on a rock, some bit of protoplasm, that's the modern view. And, that's the fanatic modern view. But yeah, that's a world of anxiety and meaninglessness and who am I and what the fuck. And so, the integral allows us to bring forward, not go back to, no going back, but bring forward these gifts that, it's like Ken Wilber said that 300 years ago, we went from a world where God was everywhere to a world where God was nowhere. That's jarring to a human race. So,
Yeah. And for the people, presumably the millions of people who listen to every episode of this podcast in my dreams are all really, really concerned with bringing their own purpose into fruition. Do you have any words of wisdom for that process or a tried and true methodology?
yeah, well, there's a nice little back pocket sort of, map that's really key to integral theory. And that is that Reality arises for most people in first, second, and third person. That's true through history. It just seems to be human. All human languages have an I, a you, and an it. And so if there's a next me that wants to be happening, one of the ways that I can sort of help sort that out and work with it and participate in it. Again, we're participating in an evolution that is powered by evolution, emergence itself. So I can do that in first person. So that's sort of like, what am I able to see? What am I able to take into account? And so I want to be always learning. I want to be stretching my view and including more in it. And so that's first person. Second person, relationships. I want to have a bigger circle of moral compassion. I want more people in it. So, that's one of the ways we can map evolution as we go from egocentric, where it's like me, maybe me and my family, then me and my clan, and then me and my race, me and my country. And then eventually you become world centric, where everybody's in. So that politically, that would be something you would want to be working on. You would want to be noticing who's my enemy. Who if somebody, it's like Trump or Rinpoche used to say that, the bad news is the good news. Who's really pissing me off? Who's really in my way? Who's really not okay with me? And to be working with that. Also, of course, friends, family, how am I serving? How am I in relationship? That whole world of second person, it's a dimension of reality. So I can be working with that. And then third person is, what am I doing? What am I creating? How am I participating in the world and actually bringing something new to the world, or at least bringing my particular version of it to the world? And that's, so, it's that old Jewish thing that when I get to heaven, God's not going to ask me, why were you not Moses? God's going to ask me, why were you not you? You know, And so all of this is wanting to happen. It's there. The doors are, the road's there. And we want to continue to, get up in the morning and walk it, and not just sit on the couch. And that's, that's always there, you know. And we live in a culture. It's one of the downsides of the upside is that you don't really have to do much if you don't want to. And you can sort of slide by. And that's not good enough for evolution. Evolution doesn't like you to be comfortable. And so it doesn't want anything to be comfortable or peaceful. It's again, they didn't consult me, but apparently that is the rules of the road.
Yeah, there's an interesting ambiguity even in our language around that. I was doing something for my coaching program, and I think in the script was something like showing up at your most comfortable or really being yourself. And immediately it went to like thinking of somebody watching TV in their pajamas, and it's like that's not what I mean by being your most yourself.
I know. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
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 Yeah,
So
there's this.
there is that force of, the procreant urge. If I may do one more snippet of poetry from Walt Whitman, he talks about urge and urge and urge, always the procreant urge of the world. Out of the dimness, opposite equals attract. Always substance and increase. Always sex. Always the knit, K-N-I-T, always the knit of identity. Always the breed of life. And I love that. I love Whitman's poetry. Of course, the saints and sages all transmit this, breed of life to us. And again, laziness is the problem. It's such a prosaic word, but to just not give in to inertia. Inertia is the opposite, sort of the enemy of emergence. And so we want to consciously be on that side of emergence. Take some effort.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that paradox of being me tuning into what wants to come online, but not being complacent. It's really like being the next me.
Yeah, the next you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's always there beckoning. Even moment to moment, you can feel it. And if I may offer, this is again a bit countercultural these days, but if you look at second person, you can also imagine that. Of course, in integral, we talk about that there's the spiritual practice in first person, second person, and third person. So first person would be meditation, the unfolding of my interiors, all the ways that we contemplate our deep self. Second person would be a divine other. So, is there somebody out there who's sort of assigned to me? Is there a spirit guide? Do I have some relationship to God as a person? That is a dimension of spiritual practice that is, there's a lot of allergies to that in the culture. I mean, you could definitely, spirit guides will generally work, but you got to really like have, it's not just your higher self, it's something other, you know? And so that's been really powerful for me, I have to say. When I ask for guidance, when I pray, as long as I'm praying for growth, basically, or wisdom or compassion or something, not a new Mercedes Benz, then I'm astonished at how powerful it is and how much more fruitful it is to do that than to not do that in my life. And that's been very good. And of course, third person is
Before you go on, can I ask you about that? And this feels like very intimate, but so when you do you pray to a specific being or form, or how does that? What is integral prayer for you? Because you're not praying to Jesus anymore.
no, but I
Yeah.
could be. And, integral would say, use the tradition that you're comfortable with and, just you sort of deconstruct the idea that it's the only way, and all the stuff that the sort of that hard triumphalist part of the mythological state. But yeah, you can work with whatever. I think you can work with whatever works for you on it, or whoever. And part of it can be, who are you? Are you there? Do you see me? I mean, that kind of thing, and then just see what might arise. So for me, it's like I have this vague sense that there's like a group. I almost see it as a Roman Senate, and they're kind of like watching me, and I'm assigned to them, and their job is to be my guide. And I don't have a whole lot more of a personification than that, but it's enough for me to say, okay, I don't know who you are, but I'm having a problem with, you know, Carol, or I'm having a problem deciding what to do with my life here now at this stage. What can you tell me? And that's enough for me. And I'm wary, I think most people are, of getting too detailed with it, because then you get into that sort of exclusionary, myth. But the second person, just that there is a loving intelligence that I can communicate that sees me and loves me. That's really important. That it's not just I'm seeing them, but they see me and they love me. They're on my side, and they have, they know in ways that I don't. That's been a very, very fruitful practice for me. And it feels like a reintegration of what I had when I was a kid. And Jesus loved me. This I knew. Yes. 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 I mean, part of it is, it'll be a sort of a meditation, if you will. And I'll sometimes see words appear in letters. I'll sometimes just feel something. But that's what's really uh, noticeable is not necessarily that where I'm getting something back in real time, although it does happen, but just that I'll realize 2 days later that problem is solved. I mean, I know now what I need to do, or like, for instance, I had a problem with a friend and it was intractable and felt very solid and difficult. It was just gone. It just was. And it was for her as well. And I don't know why, but that's been one of the more recent fruits of that practice to me. And to me, I absolutely relate it to the fact that I asked, and I asked with a good heart, you know.
Yeah. So this is really great for me. And the atheist in me is having some issues, having some questions. So I'm going to continue. When you get this, either the answer verbally, the images, even just the feeling of relaxation, do you have a sense that's coming from not you? Consciousness? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure that the whole but banana doesn't come from me, but that it does feel like a new kind of something other than me. And again, that would be on schedule, evolutionarily, because I did my stint as an atheist. I was a good atheist, by God, if you'll pardon the expression. So yeah, that's been very fruitful, and again, it really definitely brings on the meaning. Even that, what's the meaning of my life, or what's the meaning of this? A couple days later, you realize you've peeled another skin off the onion in understanding that answer to that question. And so that I do relate to, a second person spiritual practice. And so we have the first person, we have the second person, and then we have the third person, which is the celebration of the arising manifest reality, nature worship, if you will, just the trees and the clouds. And that's another one too, is that, they can sort of all get intertwixt, but to walk in nature and to ask a tree or a rock or a cloud or something that what should I do? Or or I think maybe it's you're better off talking to things that are living, like a tree. But I have had very powerful experiences of asking, talking to the trees in a way where the response is always the same, and that is everything's okay. Everything's fine. And that's deep. That's a wonderful thing. And that's not necessarily what I'd hear from my second person, but it is what I hear from, when I relate to nature. Yeah. So,
And
that's
it's just so stereotypical that that's what a tree or a mountain would say because
yeah.
of their perspective, right? They're just
Yes, exactly.
dude,
Exactly.
this is just like the tiniest of
Yeah,
moments.
yeah, yeah. And that's not a bad thing to capital R realize from time to time. You always have to re-realize it because you get recontracted, but that does break that contraction. And you enter, the world beyond time and space in a way, that is always ever present. And that world, that's alive, 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 you know.
Thank you. I want to take it back and a little bit more in the executive coaching direction to maybe close us out or just do another segment here. Let's say that this new passion for Twitter goes really well and the right people, whoever that may be for you, are listening. People that you want to be listening are listening. Where would you love for that to take you? 5 years from now, where would that ideally lead? What would that look like?
Well, I think this probably relates to my stage of life. I'm pushing 70. I'd be fine with it just right here. That's the beauty of the virtual world, is that I can do it right here. And so I wouldn't necessarily see myself traveling or lecturing. Again, I don't really particularly want a profile in that way, but I would like to think that I can add something to the conversation. And I always think of something that one of the great ad men, you probably wouldn't know him, but David Ogilvy, he was legendary in the 60s for the Volkswagen commercials and these things. But he said, and I always love this, he says, "It's not how you say it, it's what you say." And I love that because Integral does give you something to say. That there, it helps you there's no issue in which the harmonization of worldviews doesn't bring something forth that's new. So that's not going to be the problem. I think I could rise to the occasion if there were a big following and, do the job, but I don't see it as being anything that would be, change my life much. Because I do like the Hausfrau, I got to say.
It's really,
I'm going
it's
to
really
start wearing
funny.
caftans, Ankur. And I mean, I got to be careful here.
It's really funny you bring that up, the Hausfrau thing, because just 2 weeks ago, I threw a party for my mother, and a friend of hers came, who was originally from Germany. This German lady came, and my daughter, who's 5 years old, was wearing this apron, and my daughter went out. This woman came a little bit earlier, as people of that generation tend to come earlier rather than later. So we weren't like ready, but my daughter came out and showed her into the backyard and like offered her a drink. This like little 5-year-old. And this woman, I go back there, and this woman was like, "Look, she's just a little Hausfrau. You have a perfect little Hausfrau." And
Oh, that is so good.
which was my introduction to the term just a few weeks ago. So it's funny to think of you and my daughter as the only two Hausfraus that I really know.
Well, let me just pause on your beautiful 5-year-old daughter who knew what to do.
Oh yeah.
With a guest who arrived and you weren't quite ready.
No,
Knew what to do.
she's amazing like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God bless her.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you familiar with this kind of the ancient Indian concept of the 4 stages of, maybe it's more than 4, but at least 4 stages of life? Yeah. What I love about that is that in every stage, whether you're the student, whether you're the householder, whether you're the retired kind of civil servant advisor type role, or the 4th, the renunciant, you're contributing. We're all contributing in our own way.
Yeah. Thank you, Ankur, for pointing that out because I do love that. And I haven't thought about it in a long time. And what really the piece that fits into my puzzle of that right now is that if I weren't going to do anything on Twitter or anything else, if I were really just going to close the computer and work in my garden and be a good person to the people around me and to, contemplate the beauty of reality, I would be contributing. And it doesn't have to be in any form other than that. That's also a rigorous path. That doesn't mean, that doesn't include much of the couch, but it is a path that thank you for pointing out that is completely legitimate. And I'm getting to that age.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about that is, in our, especially in the West, but my personal obsession with doing shit, there's something about the enoughness in there that is deeply challenging and can, I think, potentially be deeply healing. That concludes another episode of the 10,000 Heroes Show. Thank you again for listening. And I hope that this has contributed in some small way to your own personal journey towards being a hero, whatever that means for you. I'd like to give a shout out to Pierre for the episode artwork, DJ Plainview for the theme music, and to our producer and editor, Martine. This podcast is sponsored by Momentum Lab, our year-long conscious business accelerator. If your business is an expression of your purpose, Momentum Lab might be exactly what you need. Check us out on momentumlab.com and sign up for a free coaching call. We are here to serve. And finally, as you probably know, I love communication. If this episode has impacted your life in any way, hopefully positively, let me know. Our email is info@10kh.show. And there are other ways, of course, to contact us in the show notes. Check them out. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and take care.